You got your Bibles open to 1 Peter. We're going to be back in 1 Peter again today in chapter 2 this week. Kind of reflecting back on chapter 1 last week. I'm still flying solo. Got to get the Hoggatt house right. I'll tell you what, between tonsils and having two seniors and everything else, man, there's just a lot going on in my neck of the woods these days. And they're right. The older you are when you have your tonsils out, the worse it is. Because my 18-year-old daughter is like, this is the worst thing ever. And so she doesn't do, she's very healthy and does not have surgery or sickness much or anything like that. So this is like a world of hurt for her. And she's trying to like grin and bear it, not do like pain medicine or anything like that because she don't want to do any of that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, girl, ain't no heroes up in here. All right. She's like, so we're trying to get her through it. So she'll hopefully go back to school this week. So continue to pray for her and her recovery. It's been kind of, she thought, I'll be good by Wednesday. And she had them out on Friday. And she thought by Wednesday she'd just be like up and running around doing her thing. And she's like, my throat, my ears. She's like dying. So pray for her. She's constantly struggling with that a little bit, but we'll get over it sooner or later. So I hope you got your Bibles open to 1 Peter chapter 2. That's where we're going to be at today. We're talking about this idea of building blocks, this idea of being a cornerstone. Today is kind of a unique connection back to what we talked about last week. We talked about last week about Jesus. Peter was talking about he's sending this message out to these dispersed believers, right? They're kind of scattered all over the place in Asia, present-day Turkey. That's kind of where they're all. And he's writing to these folks, telling them that they're holy, right? They're a called people. They're a nation set apart. They're these followers of Jesus. Don't listen to false teaching. Don't do all these things. And he's going to get into a little more specifics today because he's going to talk about being a cornerstone. He's going to talk about being a building block. He's going to talk about being the instrument, the tool of God's choosing for the gospel to move forward. Who doesn't want to be chosen to do something? Right? Who doesn't want to be a part of something more important, a bigger, I don't know what you want to call it, purpose? I remember when I was a young youth pastor, in ministry, I used to sit in places like this, and I would sit and I would think, maybe someday, God will call me to get to preach on a stage. I loved being a youth pastor, but there was this idea of, standing on stage and preaching, being the pastor, sharing the message, preaching the gospel, being the point, the pastor shepherd, the pastor leader. That used to just seem like, whoa, that is such a big deal. Yeah, I have fun with the youth, and I do, and I grew in that, and and I remember the very first time my pastor, it was actually in Shawnee, was where I was at. I was about 27 or 28. It was a Sunday night. He wasn't quite ready to give me Sunday morning reins. But he was, Sunday night, we'll let him dip his toe in those shallow waters and see how he does. And I remember he was going to be gone, and we had a guy coming to preach in the morning, but he was going to preach that night, and he came into my office. I was about 27, 28, somewhere in that name, and him saying, hey, I want you to preach the Sunday night service this week. So-and-so's preaching in the morning. He can't be for the evening service. Can you preach tonight? And I was just sitting there going, whoa. So out on the big stage, not back in the youth room, not back in the, not even, I had done some preaching and teaching and things in like a youth ministry setting, but man, that was my wheelhouse. I was comfortable there. I knew how to handle that audience. It was students and even other youth pastors, but man, to preach, to be asked to preach. And I don't know, I study a lot for sermons. I don't know that I've ever studied more for a sermon in my life than I did that night, that week leading up to that. I was like, I will be ready for everything. Because there was this higher, I don't even want to call it a calling, or there was just this higher idea of what I was about to do. I was being asked to step into this incredibly important role, and I was given the reins to it, and I was trusted with this piece that was precious and important. And for a pastor to relinquish their pulpit means there's an element of trust that exists there. What Peter is talking about today is something kind of similar. It's this idea of God has called you into salvation relationship, right? And so since he's done that, you have now been asked and charged to be a part of a link in a chain of something far greater than yourself. You are the chosen tool and instrument that God preordained before time for the gospel to move forward. You are the chosen instruments for that. Not anything else, not animals, he chose you, created you for that very purpose. Because if it was just about your salvation, what are we all still doing here, right? Because if you've ever come to a place where you trusted Jesus and it was just about knowing him and being in relationship with him, if it was just that, if it was just trusting the cross, trusting what he did, death, burial, and resurrection, if it was just that, there would be no purpose left for us, right? We would have fulfilled our purpose, our creation purpose. We trusted it, we believed in it, we surrendered to it, then what are we all still doing here? Right? We're still here because there's the second half, there's the knowing him part, now there's the making him known part. Now it's the multiplication process. It's adding more links in the chain, going further down the road so that others may know, that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Well, how does that happen? How does every knee get to hear and how does every tongue get to confess if they don't hear, right? If they're not exposed to. Well, how does exposure happen? Someone has to go and tell them. Somebody has to go across the street. Somebody has to go around the world. Somebody has to go to another state. Somebody has to go into that locker room or that classroom or that hallway. That's the only way it gets there. Right? Now, are there supernatural things that happen where God just falls in a space? I believe so. Ron Smith passed away a few years ago. He's a veterinarian in Chickasha. And been a long-time vet. He was a member of my church. I had both of his students in my student ministry, his sons, great kids. And Ron was an interesting dude. He was fully called to missions, but he was fully called to be a vet too, so it was kind of a unique deal. He spent probably about a month or two a year on mission with a particular mission organization where he would literally kind of close his vet shop down and he would go halfway around the world with this work. I mean, he'd be gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, spreading the gospel. It's kind of a cool thing, and I always loved that about Ron. And to full confession, Ron had asked me a couple times to go with him. I was like, Ron, where you go and the stories you tell, not built for it, bro. I'm just going to be honest with you. Where you're going, man, I don't even, we're talking like primitive. And that's the way Ron liked it. I mean, he was boots on the ground, little to no electricity. He took all a bunch of solar-powered stuff. There was it was like, and there's this group of them, this particular organization that he traveled with, that's what they did. He had a couple stories that it was kind of unique that he told, and I'll tell you two really fast before we get into the text. And this is how we know God chooses the instruments. You're in the tool belt. You're in the toolbox. All right? You might be 1/8 of an inch. You might be a wrench. You might be a hammer. You may be a socket. I don't know what you are, but you're specific. And God will call to use you when he needs your particular tool. And the one in particular was he did a lot of work in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, like some kind of unique places. One in particular, they were in South Africa on a mission trip. Said it was the craziest thing. He said we had to travel this road by foot. We could use a car. They did use cars from time to time, but we could only go so far because there were just no roads. And so we would drive into a point and we'd have to walk in like 3 miles to this like particular village on this little narrow cut in the middle of wild Africa. We're not talking like there's fences up and keeping the scary stuff out. The scary stuff's just out there with you. All right? The stuff that like crawls on its belly and bites you or jumps out of the trees and grabs you. I mean, all that stuff. I'm like, Ron, I can't do that kind of stuff, man. I'm too domesticated. All right? I'm just not built for it. So they're walking on this narrow path, He said, and we're all pretty much on edge. He said, we had guys that traveled with weapons. I'm just being honest. He'd always say, I'll be honest with you, they were just there for protection because there were wild animals that were out there that we had to keep an eye out for. He said, we're walking along, and you're kind of on edge anyway because you know that is the potential, right? He said, you're not worried about, it's like the gospel was the easiest thing we did. So we were worried about getting eaten. And so you're just kind of like on edge about that stuff. So your default's kind of at a 5. If 0 is super chill, and 10's like you're ramped up, freaked out. He said your default was a 5, just because of the whole fear of the elements kind of thing. So you're just kind of on guard. So we're just walking down a little narrow path, cut through this high grass that you can't see anything. He's like, it could just jump out and you just would not see it coming. He said it was kind of unnerving to walk in and walk out every day. So we went in early. As soon as the sun was up, we never traveled at dark. Said that was just a no-go. So we're walking in the morning. He said it's a real narrow path. We're walking. He said literally this guy just jumps out of this high grass right in front of him. And he said, pretty lucky he didn't get shot, that those guys didn't just react, but they didn't. He starts speaking in his native tongue, and of course they're all kind of confused and dazed, and like, what's going on, what's going on? And he's like, well, the translators are kind of they're not fully understanding, get him to slow down. They're like, tell us what's going on. He was cutting through the grass, walking through this high grass by himself to this village, and in the best way he could describe in his tongue to these translators, something compelled him to step out into the middle of that path. He's like, something compelled you, made you. He's like, I don't know. A voice said, step out now. And I just did. And right then and there, he was introduced to the saving knowledge of Jesus. We don't know when God will do what he chooses to do. And he speaks all the languages. And he just compels. You, as the tool, just have to be ready when the drawer gets opened and you get picked. Ron said, we were just ready. He said, after we kind of calmed down, and we were not all about to have a full-on panic attack about what had just happened, and we sat down right in the middle of a path and began to introduce, and he said, that's what we were there for that day, was that man might come to know the Lord. We spent all day sitting right in the middle of a path talking to this one guy. He said that's why we were sent for that day, was for him. It was his time for him to hear it. And it wasn't going to happen any other time. And there was going to be one opportunity. There was going to be one chance, right? And that's what it was. You have to be ready. You're a link in a chain. You're a step in a process. You're what God chooses to use. The other one that Ron always told a couple of years later on his separate trip, he had a retired football coach that went with him. And they had pulled up to this village, hot, no AC in the truck, and this little van that they're riding around in. And they pulled up, and the guy just was like, I can't do it. I cannot. It's the first stop, first day they go out on first day into the village. You're like, can't do it. Will not get out of the truck, the little van. And they're like, fine, you're going to bake in this thing. Like, you can stay in here if you want. Prop the windows open, the doors open, but we're all going in. We're going to go talk to these folks. We've been kind of building up towards this. And he was like, I can't do it. Like, he was completely freaked out, would not get out of the pit, wouldn't get out of the van to go in. So he's just sitting in this van, sweating his brains out, not going anywhere. Notices there's a tree about 50 yards away, and there's one guy sitting underneath it that's from the village, and he's like, I got to get out of this van. I'm going to go sit in this thing. I'm not going to say nothing. I'm just going to go sit on the other side of the trunk of this tree of that guy, and I'm just going to sit in that shade just to get out of the vehicle. They've been gone for an hour or two, already in town, already in the village doing their thing. So he wanders over, sits down on the base of this tree. It's on the other side. Lo and behold, this guy speaks English, which he was kind of shocked, and they began this conversation under this tree. He asked him what he did, and was trying to explain to him what a football coach was in the United States. This guy had no idea what that even remotely was referring to. But he tried to explain it the best he could, and they just opened up this dialogue. We ended up talking for about 30 minutes, kind of explained what he was doing. He said the next thing you know, this coach starts kind of telling him about Jesus. got comfortable in his own skin. He was like, okay, I'm not going to freak out about it. I can do this. Gets through it. Guy gives his life to the Lord underneath a tree. And the guy's so excited he wants to go tell the whole village. And the guy's like, whoa. He's like, hey, I don't know about that. He's like, come. We got to tell everyone. And he was like, ugh. He was like, just come on. And so Ron looks up. Ron said, I see him coming with this guy. And he goes, Mick, it had been the worst day. We could not. They weren't receptive. They were kind of belligerent and agitated. He said they wouldn't. We tried to get it. They were just not interested. Even though we had brought supplies and different things like that, we were really trying to kind of build this connection. We'd been there 2 or 3 times. Nothing happened. So all of a sudden, Coach comes running with this guy, and this guy starts in his native tongue, starts telling what has happened, and all of a sudden, this the whole attitude shifts in this whole place of this tribe of about 100 people, 150 people, kids, family, men, children, women. Chief of the tribe, sitting underneath the tree, just cooling off, and some random football coach who doesn't even want to get out of the van leads him to the Lord. And because of what had happened, he goes and tells this chief goes and tells this story about Jesus in the best way he knows how, and it changes the entire atmosphere. He said by the time we were done, he said we saw that whole village, or if not most of it, make professions of faith before we left. And I remember hearing that story and thinking, God will just do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. We're just a link in a chain. We're a building block. We're a part of the stones that are being laid. Right? My daughter loves Legos. She's 18 years old. She gets Legos every birthday and Christmas. She's 18. You know what the hardest thing for her to decide to do right now, moving out and going to college, is? What am I going to do with my Legos? She doesn't know where they're going to go. She's like, do I take them? I was like, I don't know if you want to you don't got a lot of room in that dorm. I don't know if you want to take up a whole bunch of space with your Legos, but she loves to build and create. She has since she was a little girl. But you know what is vitally important in building Legos? If you're a Lego builder in here, you know what I'm talking about. The foundation that you build, those first steps that you follow are crucial to the rest of it working right. Building right, setting right, fitting right, and being stable to hold up the weight of everything else. The foundation is key. And so what Peter is, and I apologize, my intro was like 18 minutes long. That's crazy. And so you're a living stone. So this is what Peter says. So let's jump into the text, and we'll go quick. So put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander. It's like you've been called by Jesus. You've been set apart by him. So because of that, throw away all that. Cut away all those things from the past. Those shouldn't exist anymore. All the slander, all the deceit, all the anger, all the hypocrisy, all that stuff's got to go. It's just got to be you. And like you were a newborn, he says, like a newborn baby long for pure spiritual milk, that by you may be grown up into salvation. So you get rid of all these things. You crave spiritual milk so that you may grow in your salvation. All right, through the study, the memorization, the pouring into God's word, that's how we grow. This is what feeds us. If you have tasted that the Lord is good. If you want these things, if you've truly trusted Jesus, this is what you want. This is what you desire. This is what you need. Without it, we can't function. Right? We have to have it. So as you think about being this cornerstone, how can I be the most successful link in this chain? How can I be the most successful building block or cornerstone or crucial piece to what God wants to do? How do I do that? Is, well, you grow and you surround yourself with people that challenge you and disciple you, and you spend time in the Word. You believe that iron sharpens iron, and you put people next to you. They're going to get you where you want to go, spiritually, biblically, as a man, as a parent, as a father, as a mother, as a friend, as a child, whatever the case may be. You put people around you that are going to, I've got a young man I'm discipling right now. He's on our football team. He's a freshman. He is a knucklehead. Not a believer. If he is, man, the fruit is rotten. We got work to do. And I tell him all the time when he comes to my office, like, Coach, what do I got to do to get better? I was like, you got to start being in the right place when I tell you to. I taught him about David and Bathsheba the other day in my office. He looked at me like a calf at a new gate. He had no idea what I was talking about. I was like, you know what the problem was in that Bible, in that story was? And he's like, first of all, I don't even know who David and Bathsheba are. He's like, what are you even talking about? I was like, it's for another time. We only got 10 minutes. I said, the problem with that story was, at the very first sentence of that story, it says, in a time where kings were at war. Where was David when the kings were at war? Where was he at in that story? Where was he at? On top of his what? Roof. He wasn't where he was supposed to what? Be. His army was at war. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. Sin creeped into his life because he wasn't where he was supposed to be, and it led to a disaster in his life. And I keep telling him, I said, young man, I said, you know what your biggest problem is? You are never where you are supposed to be. If you'll be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, 90% of your problems will literally disappear. Be where you're supposed to be. As believers, we got to be where we're supposed to be when we're supposed to be there. When God says go, right? You go. I coach old linemen, and they're, God bless them, big dummies sometimes. They're like, Coach, what about? I was like, no. There you go again thinking. I don't need you thinking, I need you doing. And when we say go here, this is where we need you to go. I told you about my man who struggled with left and right last year a little bit. Every now and again, he's like, I know it says right, but man, it feels good to go left. Quit going left, because you're messing everything up. I need you to go right. That's where I need you to be. All right? So as we grow in this journey that God takes us on, it builds us up. We be where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be there. It says, as you come to him, a living stone rejected by men. Jesus was this living stone. He is the cornerstone. He is the foundation. Rejected by men. Rejected by prophets, not even welcome in his own hometown, right? Run out of Nazareth. Birthplace, didn't even want him. He is the living stone, been rejected. He is what it all matters, what it all comes down to. He has to be the foundation of it all. If we're going to be this chain, that's where it all starts. Remember, we talked about Peter last week when he was asked, who do people say that I am? Is you are the Christ, the Son of the living God? And what did Jesus reply back to him? On this what? Rock. On this truth, on this foundation, on this cornerstone, I will build my church. That's y'all. On that truth, for everything will rest. Everything rests on that truth, and that truth alone. Been rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious. You yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, as a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. You are it. You're it. It is like hearing your name called the first pick in the draft over and over and over again. I'm going to close with this quick story and this quick text. We'll be done. My senior year of high school, I was a pretty good student, decent athlete, blessed with some great parents, the whole nine. But I wasn't going to blow you away with my academic. They were like, oh my gosh, this dude is amazing. Man, I took advanced classes, I did pretty good, so on and so forth. But I'm by no means a world beater. My kids have lapped me academically. I quit being able to help them in school quite some time ago. They've been relying on the resources of others. But I applied for this big scholarship my senior year. My hometown had an alumni scholarship, big scholarship. They do 2 a year, big deal, massive. I applied for it. My parents were like, you got to apply for that scholarship. Apply for that scholarship, right? Senior parents, if you know what all we do the whole year is just talk about scholarships. We've filled out 1 million of them at my house. Apply for the scholarship. they give it during this awards assembly that's after graduation, your senior year. Only thing I had to go back to after graduation was the awards assembly. Nothing more, nothing less. I sat in the back when I got there because the people I was going up against that I knew that applied was like our valedictorian, and like there was like some stalwarts in my class that applied because they gave one girl and one boy. And I was sitting back there, and I was kind of running through my mind, and and my parents, my dad was there, my mom still taught school, and so she had gotten there late, and she was kind of sitting on the other side of the auditorium, and I could see her because we were kind of all in the same room. My dad ran the newspaper in my hometown, so he was up taking pictures and stuff because it's a small town newspaper. You take pictures of stuff like this. And so they're in the audience, but I'm kind of sitting this back. I'm like, no one's beating Adrian Cardenas, man. That guy is awesome. I would vote for him. And I'm up for the award. And I'm sitting there, and it gets to the end, and they do the girl first. Her name was Erin Nickham. I'll never forget it. I was like, oh, yeah, that's a great choice. Erin's awesome. She's amazing. And they get to the boy, and they call my name for the male scholarship. And I was like, that can't be right. And I stood up, and I remember walking to the front, from the back of the auditorium. My mom, everybody's clapping, excited, stuff like that. I was like, I can't believe they just called my name. It paid for, like, a lot of school. It was a huge blessing to be recognized and be called by name, right? It was a big deal. I remember my dad, because he was the editor and managing editor and publisher of our local, so I grew up in I minded my P's and Q's because my dad would put me on the front page of the newspaper so fast just to out me in front of my whole community and just make me a laughing stock. So my brother and I were like, straight and narrow, because he had a resource that he could just trump us real quick. But he put it on the front page of the newspaper, me and Aaron. And I got made fun of later because I wore shorts and sandals, Doc Martin sandals, in case you were curious. And Aaron wore like this really nice dress. I was not dressed as professional as my dad thought I should have been for the front page of the newspaper. That's neither here nor there. But I wanted that scholarship. And I remember thinking, how cool it is to have your name called in something big like that. Now that was a big deal. Now, that's small town America, whatever. This is, I don't even know how to quantify this. You're a royal priesthood. You're a royal priesthood called by God to be his instruments. You are the Avengers. You're the frontline defense. You are the ones that when it goes down, he needs. A royal priesthood called not just generally, not just sort of, by name. By name. It's something to be known by your name. There's a sense of pride, and there's a sense of when we're known. I'm not talking about fame. I'm not talking about, oh, they know who I am. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about when you're known to a degree. When somebody calls you by name, I try my hardest to learn my kids' names at school, so that when I see them in the hallway, I can call them by name. And that if I do have to get on to them about something, or I do need to encourage them about their academics, or I need to call home, or whatever the case may be, I like to be able to call that parent or talk to that student, and I like to call them by their name, and I like to be able to know something that's going on in their life. Because that builds a connection between the two of us, that I'm not another hammer in your life that's going around smacking you on the head. Now, we may have to get to that point, but right now, we're in this together. So when God says, you are a holy priesthood to offer these spiritual sacrifices acceptable for God through Jesus Christ. As it stands in Scripture, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone, chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. God is saying, I am building this thing, and whoever stands upon it and build will not be put to shame, will not be made embarrassed by it, but will be built up for it. So the honor is for you who believe, but for those who do not believe, the stone rejects and stumbles. So you can go one of two ways here. You can be the stone that God builds upon, and you're a link in a chain that goes towards the kingdom, or you can be something that gets in the way. That second one doesn't sound so fun. I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't want to get in the way of. Getting in the way of things is terrible. I was on a not so fun highlight reel earlier this year during our football season. Spring ball's getting close. The football's starting to kind of get back on the brain a little bit. We're scrimmaging Bigsby. If you know anything about high school football, that's like playing the Dallas Cowboys, which is that's not saying much, but pretty big deal in high school football. They're really good. If you're a football fan, they only run 4 passing plays and 4 running plays. They run 8 plays total. Now you're like, well, how in the world can you run 8 plays and be successful? They run them to absolute perfection every time they run them. Now they have some versions of them that exist, but they don't, they're like robots when you play against them. It's ridiculous. It's unbelievable. They are disciplined beyond belief. Now they're really talented and they have a lot of things going on, but man, they don't mess up much. And that's really hard when you're working with teenagers, man, because teenagers, their defaults mess up, kind of. But here's the funny part. Here's where it's not so fun. Like the 3rd or 4th play of the game, all right, I coach offense, and so we were on defense, and so we were talking through some things on our headsets, and I had kind of turned my back to the field. That's on me. Because one of their war horses that they have out there that's unbelievable ran an out route at like 10 yards to our sidelines, and their quarterback, who throws the ball perfect, he caught it full speed going out of bounds about 4 yards away from me. And I had about that fast to react. I don't know if you can tell by me looking up here, I don't have that kind of reaction time. It's more of like a, kind of like that's the speed. Needless to say, I got about this far before that gigantor rolled up on me, and I thought, they're just going to have to leave me here because I can't move. I mean, he blasted me on the sidelines. Headset went flying off, my hat turned sideways, knocked a shoe off. I mean, it was a yard sale right where it was at. It was not good. And I learned really quick, the rest of the year, 12 weeks or whatever it was, my head was on a swivel. I don't care if that play was 1,000 yards the other direction. I was like, guys, just heads up, watch out, be safe. Everybody look around. Because it's not good to be in the way. Because you get in the way, sometimes you get trampled. God's going to do what he's going to do. And you can either be the cornerstone that's built upon, the engine that runs it, you're on the train, you're part of the party, right? Or you can be the stumbling block that gets in the way. Which one of those? You can get trampled, you can get left behind, no calling, no purpose, separated God forever. You can do that, or you can get on board. They stumbled because they disobey the word, and they were destined to, he writes. But in verse 9, he says this: you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellence of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. Guys, you're not writing this to Jews. Peter was a Jew. He's writing this to Gentiles. He's writing it to you and to me. Not the chosen race, not the Jews, not the ones where the line of Judah would come from. To us. He said, you are just as chosen as they are. You are a royal priesthood, called out of darkness into marvelous light. You are a link in a chain that has been called to change the world. When Steve Jobs, those of you who know who that is, he was the creator of Apple, right? Macintosh. And innovator, not necessarily a very nice man, but kind of whatever he touched turned to gold. You know, struggled a lot, got fired from Apple at one point. You know, you've probably seen some of the movies that are out there about it. He was a prickly character. But he knew that he was onto something with personal computing. You know, and he knew that there was something unique about it that he would not trade on. And the creativity of it, and the end-to-end elements of it, and all these other things. Famously, he met with, and he's in one of the movies, but the conversation goes similar to this. He had done the exec that he hired away to come help him build Apple or Macintosh, had been at Pepsi and had developed, right, at that time Coca-Cola beat Pepsi 10-1, it wasn't even close. But then if you remember in the 80s, there was a new ad that came out in the early 80s called The Choice of a what? Remember? Choice of a New Generation. That slogan made Pepsi competitive for the first time ever. Now, they still don't outsell Coke, but it got them at least in the market share. More like 4-1 now instead of like 15 or 20-1 like it had been. In fact, this gentleman went on to ultimately help Steve Jobs develop that little multicolored apple that's got a bite out of it that says think different. This guy helped develop that. But the original pitch goes like this. He sat down with him and had a conversation. In the movie, it goes a little bit different. When you read some of the biographies and the stories, he sits down with him. They're at dinner, and Steve says, I couldn't even afford the dinner I was taking him to. I was going to have to max myself out to the teeth to even pay for the meal. I had no money to rub together to speak of. And when he made the pitch, the guy from Pepsi was just not interested. I mean, this guy's killing it at Pepsi at the time. He's like, why in the world am I going to go jump ship to this startup computer company that's failing miserably, all right, to a guy that was working at Atari a few years ago, and Atari wasn't exactly crushing it anymore, all right? And so I was like, what in the world, why would I do this? And it doesn't go well. And at the very end, he says this, and I love this quote. I've used it a million times. Steve Jobs looked at him, he's like, Steve, I just don't think I can do it. I just don't think that's just where I need to be. And he said, that's fine. He said, but I want to leave you with this one thought. He's like, do you want to keep making soda pop for the rest of your life? Or do you want to change the world? And it made him think for the first time. He's like, whoa. And in a leap of faith, jumped on board with Steve, and the rest is history. It was a bumpy road, but now Macintosh, one single share of Apple stock is like, what, $500? One share. Back then it was pennies. Here's the deal. You can go on your own way and make soda pop for the rest of your life if you want. That's fine. Or you can trust who Jesus said he is, fully surrender that you're a royal priesthood, you're chosen to do something great, and do what? Change the world. Now, does that mean globally? Maybe. But it also might mean your neighborhood. It might mean your classroom. It might be your office. It could be a million places. But you've got to just say yes. You've got to trust and believe that you are exactly what Jesus has called you to be. Because you know you're set apart. We talked about that last week. God said you are holy, set apart, different. You are equipped. Now, Go do it. He has all the faith in the world in you. That's why you're still here. And next week is Palm Sunday. And we're going to be one of my favorite texts in Luke next week as Jesus enters into Jerusalem. The Passover week. Right? Where the rubber literally hit the road. And how everything Jesus did was purposeful. And I love it that you guys are going to get into the Passover this week a little bit, and you're going to look at the elements and look at the parts. And there's not a more beautiful, powerful picture of salvation than the elements of Passover. Sometimes the Orthodox Jews that are not believers, and when they celebrate the Passover, I'm like, you really don't see it at all? Like at all? Like not even a little bit. Like leaven and unleavened, like sin, like all the things that matter. Here it's like, man, that's tough. Missed that one, big time. But next week we're gonna celebrate that. Jesus coming into that city, what that meant. And that even when Jesus knew everything that was going to happen, still choosing that path. Because he fully understood what Peter was talking about. He was the cornerstone. Literally. Let's pray.